Hi, I'm Ralph Preston, and I'm here with Sarah Gaffney. And today we're going to do a little talking about storytelling. Tell a little bit about our stories and why it's important to share your story. We're doing this as a part of an initiative around Stroke Awareness Month, which is May, where we're encouraging people to tell their stories. So we thought we would kick off that initiative with a little discussion about why it's important and what kinds of things you might include in your story. And so I'll introduce myself now and save the conversation for a little later when Sarah and I get into it. So, like I said, my name is Ralph Preston. I have a group called Stroke Buddies. It's a Facebook group, it's a website, it's a YouTube channel. It's a few things. I'm a stroke survivor, and I had a stroke 14 years ago, and I made a pretty good recovery. And from pretty early on, I identified that as stroke survivors, we don't get everything that we need. I also, from pretty early on, had a lot of questions that I didn't had to find the answers out to myself, and I decided that I really wanted to help people. And so I've been doing that for I don't know, 12, 13, 14 years. A couple of my friends said that I was talking about helping people. I was still in the rehab hospital, and I said, I have no recollection of it, but it sounds like me, doesn't it? So I'm trying to be that person that I wish I could have talked to after my stroke, and that's what's led me to the work that I do. So Sarah, why don't you give us a little background about yourself and how you got to be here today?
Sure. So my name is Sarah Gaffney, and I'm the program coordinator for the Brain Injury Association of America's Maine chapter. And I have kind of a long, varied connection to brain injury. I had 8 concussions by the time I was 19 due to playing soccer, and so that was kind of my initial introduction to brain injury. And then my first husband was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor when he was 27. So for the next 4.5 years, I was his caregiver and advocate. And not too long after his death, in 2014, I actually started doing brain injury advocacy work. And now I'm so grateful to get up every morning and help other individuals and families living through brain injury, providing supports and resources, and sometimes just someone to talk to about the experience. In addition to being a brain injury advocate, I'm a writer. And one of my most favorite parts of my job at BAA Maine is helping people tell their stories. So every month in our newsletter, we feature a survivor story or a family member story, and just helping people along the way tell those stories has been so powerful. And so I love that part of my job. And that's kind of what's brought me here today with Ralph.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to ask you about those stories. Since you've been doing it 7 years, you've done over 80 stories, and that's a lot. I forgot to mention that I'm a lifelong videographer, pre-stroke and post-stroke. I use my video skills to bring exercises, awareness, knowledge, that kind of thing to other stroke survivors. And I was not a writer. I was married to one for 42 years, and I became a writer. Certainly, as a videographer, the big part of what you're doing is you're learning someone's story, whether you're selling a product or literally telling a survivor's story. It's your job to learn the story and translate it to somebody else. So I've always, I've been very aware of being a storyteller and trying to hone my storytelling skills as a part of my career. So, Sarah, why don't we talk about why it's important to tell your story? And I think it's important from two sides, both from the telling of the story to other people, but I also think there's value in it for the person telling the story. I can start off by saying, like I said, I wasn't a writer, but I had things that I wanted to share. after my stroke, and I started a blog. Yeah, the first post is like titled "Me Blogging," with a bunch of question marks, because it was unlike me to blog at all or to write. But I found two things. I found that in telling my story, it helped me think about everything. And like, I'm back to the thing about, as a videographer, you got to learn the story to tell the story. Well, I kind of had to learn my own story, if you will, by talking to myself and talking through it. And that was very valuable to me. And I think that anybody who tells their story will find that that's true for them. The other thing I found was, after all these years of having to write and being a videographer, I managed to, well, we can get into this in a minute. I expressed a number of my feelings in addition to the story. To me, a story is more about like how you feel, your reactions, things you overcome, like that. Not, I spent 31 days in the rehab hospital and then went to a assisted living center for the next 6 months. Those are details and facts. They're good. But somehow or another in this, I started getting comments. Well, they were compliments too, on the blog about, one guy said, "I laughed, I cried, I went through your journey with you. It was so similar to mine, it was eerie. Thank you for putting into words what I couldn't express myself." And I went, whoa. Because I wasn't particularly expecting that. I guess I really started the whole thing, well, to help people, but I also started it because it was part of my process. So I think that stories have benefit to both the teller and the reader.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely going through a brain injury, whether as a survivor or a caregiver, it's a big deal. It's a huge change. And I think sometimes the writing of your story kind of makes you stop and focus in a little bit on what you've been through. I think oftentimes it can help people see how far they've really come too, when they sit down and really, think about, okay, this is where I was, right after the injury. This is where I am now. That can be a little eye-opening sometimes when you see that. And then, like you said, it can help others too. I think that's, it not only helps the person telling their story, but it can help other people. Um, Brain injury is such an isolating experience for so many. And over the years, I've had so many people say, just seeing part of my experience in someone else's story really validated their own experience and made them feel not so alone. So whether it's a quick Facebook post or a blog post, or sharing your story in a more formal manner, the likelihood is that you're going to reach somebody who sees a little piece of their story in it, and that's providing hope or relief or a laugh, or but just being able to recognize part of their own story in yours can have a huge impact on other people.
Well, and you said the H word, hope. I was getting ready to talk about, and we still should emphasize a little bit more, I think, because one of the most important things for people reading the story, when they identify with your story, when they see you get better, it gives them some hope. It makes them see the light at the end of the tunnel instead of staring at their feet trying to do a sit to stand. So it gives them a different perspective. Another thing you said that I think is really important is that I think anybody can share a story or a piece of a story. You said it does, it can be a blog post, it could be a group post, it could be a book, it could be a big formal thing or something simple. And I have a quick story I can tell about somebody I don't know, I guess I coach her. I'm also her friend. And she was a few months ago, she was doing some things like, she figured out how to mop from her wheelchair and put her hair back and a few things like that. And I said, those are big things. I struggled for 5 months to put my hair back. So there are people out there that have done it who would rally, around the fact that you did it, and there are people out there that are still struggling that you'll give hope to. And she was like, oh, I don't know. And I said, look, no matter where you are in this journey, you're always ahead of somebody. And the people that are, behind you are looking ahead to a better future for themselves, and you can give them hope. So I convinced her to post this, and, darn if it didn't get like 3,000 people post engagement and like 170 comments and stuff. It blew my exercise video posts in the group like right out of the water. But the point of this is that it did provide hope to a number of people. A number of people came on and said, I'm still working on that. Seeing you do it. Oh, she posted a video of her doing it too. Seeing you do it, gives me hope that I'll get there. But even almost as important as that, she had a desire previous to that to help other people. And she saw the impact that it had on other people, and that made her feel good that she could do something, that she could give something back. It also made her feel good about her progress, because she realized, she had come from that place, like you said, it helps you sometimes, you put together your story like I did. I put pictures of myself in the wheelchair, and then I put pictures of myself at the end riding my bicycle, so I mean, a big reminder of how far you've come. And in every journey, I think it's really important to note all of your little gains, and because they're a really good thing to pull out of your pocket when you're trying to have a pity party. That's another discussion, but so you have a story about a young man in a motorcycle accident that I thought was interesting, if you don't mind telling that.
Sure. Well, so one of early on in helping folks tell their stories through our newsletter, I had a fellow who was wanting to have his story told, but he wanted to be anonymous. He'd been in a motorcycle accident. He kind of wanted it to be a cautionary tale to maybe, change someone's decision in the future so it wouldn't happen to someone else. So he wanted to share his story, and he was very interested in that, but he didn't want his name attached to it. And I said, okay, that's not a problem. Like, we'll do it anonymously. You don't have to, you don't have to have your name on it. And as soon as we published it, he reached out to me and said, you know what, I changed my mind. I really want my name on there. And, can you print me off a copy to put in my rehab portfolio? And he was just so proud of, sharing his story and what he had accomplished and how far he had come. And it was just this wonderful, wonderful story of kind of transformation of just that process of going through telling his story and getting it out there. Was hugely impactful for him. So,
right, and you said the magic P word. It made him feel proud. There are a lot of people. I don't know that everybody, but I was shocked at the number of people who want to help other people as a result of what happened to them. I started a Facebook group, and I didn't think I was the only one in the world, but I didn't think. I mean, I would tell you that half the people in my groups, really are interested in paying it forward, and storytelling can be an important part of that. I touched on one thing that I think maybe we should talk a little bit about, and that's like what kinds of things to put in your story. Like, I was making fun of the 31 days in intensive care and then released to here and there. Details are important because they define the obstacles that you faced and what you had to overcome. But I think that it's really important for both the viewer and the writer to talk about their feelings. Because I think that those things, when that guy told me I laughed and I cried, he wasn't laughing and crying that I spent 17 days in Care Partners. He was laughing and crying about about when I expressed myself, when I expressed either the difficulty or the joy in difficulty in tackling something, and joy in accomplishing something. Those were the kinds of things. So I think that the details of your story are, some should be in there to provide a framework and a point of reference. But I think that, the more personal you can make it, the more you're going to get other people to go, yeah, I see myself in that situation. I've been there. That's what you want, that bond. Because like you said, we're so isolated after our strokes. Um, they told me 5 things to do, and I already did 4 of them, and I knew about the other one. The 5th one was they were all health and exercise and diet. I was vegetarian. Anyway, the 5th one was we're social creatures, and don't sit in the corner. You have to engage with other people. This is a big problem for anybody, TBI or stroke after their insult. Mobility becomes an issue. You don't always have the support systems. Families are sometimes wonderful. They're sometimes not so wonderful. We'll leave it at that. And so getting around and engaging in life and building community around yourself is more difficult after you have a TBI or a stroke. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I do think those little details, those personal pieces, are so important to include. And oftentimes when folks are kind of asking me, well, what should I put in there? You know, challenges that you faced and how you overcame them. I think that's something. We were talking about hope earlier. Oftentimes for folks who are earlier in their journey, being able to see, okay, this person started out here and this is where they are now. How they're feeling, you talked about that before. Some of the emotions, any particular struggles that they were facing, whether it's mental health or physical, or just those are really important for other survivors to see. And one thing, I get a lot of individuals reaching out who are getting to that place where they're ready to start giving back and helping out, and there are so many. And so this is something that I usually suggest as like a good first step. Is one thing you can do that potentially could have great impact on others is sharing part of your story or sharing part of your journey. And it can be done in lots of different ways, but it's an easy first step for giving back and helping others. And it also just generally raises awareness around brain injury and stroke. Every extra story that's out there, every additional Facebook post or Instagram post or story in a newsletter, story in a newspaper, everything that goes out there raises awareness a little bit more about brain injury. So you're contributing to that greater, awareness as well.
That's a great point, and one that I was overlooking. I was thinking about this, pretty much in terms of, well, just in this discussion, I get blinders on sometimes. I'm very focused, so I sometimes focus and forget about other things. Even though that's a part of the work that I do, what you said basically is that somebody who hasn't had a stroke or a brain injury can read the story, or if maybe they're a caregiver, or maybe they're just reading it in the newspaper. I did all this. After my stroke, I got back on my bicycle and did the senior games locally, and the newspaper wanted to do a story on me. I didn't want to make big deal about myself, but I said yes, because I put pictures in, and other people could read that and show it to somebody who had a stroke, or just you're bringing overall awareness to brain injury and stroke. And one thing I thought about was telling the story to yourself, if you will. I would encourage everybody to write. For example, I wish I had written more in the early days, because now when I have discussions like this, or I go to do videos about early recovery, I simulate what was happening back then. And it's difficult, I'm 14 years out. It's difficult 14 years later to remember that stuff. I would also encourage people to take pictures and make videos, even if they never do anything with them. Nobody ever said, I wish I didn't record that video. Many people have said, I wish I'd shot a video of that back then. So even if you never do anything with them, they help you define your story to yourself. Also, the tip for taking a lot of pictures came from a neurologist who told a friend of mine who was locked in. They stood him up at a year and a half. Took 4 years to get him to a walker. Took him 5 years to get rid of the walker. I mean, he went through a tremendous journey. And the doctor said, take lots of pictures of yourself. And he did, because I did a story on him, and he sent me about 1,500 pictures. But they showed a lot of progress, and you know, you forget where you're coming from. And the doctor was saying, you know, just a few months later, you can flip back through them and say, I'm on a walker now. Look, here's pictures of them standing me up on a standing machine. You know, I've come a long way. Because when you feel like you're making progress, it keeps you, I found it kept me on track. And I see that with other people. You need a certain amount of progress and success in order to keep motivated and building more successes. So that's
well, and I think you make a good point too about even if you just do it for yourself, it's a really valuable exercise. So even if you're like, I am never sharing this with anyone, I just want to get it out. I think both for the memory's sake, you know, you mentioned it is hard to remember. So even if you're just jotting little notes, or, you know, maybe you write in a journal, or maybe you just take time every now and again to kind of write about your experience a little bit, even if you never show it to anyone else, you've got that for yourself. And you can look back on it and see that progress and see those changes and see those details about what, you know, what the experience was like. And I think that's really, really valuable, even if no one ever sees it, but you.
well, and you know, you could get it all together and realize you have something and be like that young man with the motorcycle accident story and say, you know, okay, well, there's something here. Maybe I should. You could always change your mind. Like I said, nobody ever said, I wish I hadn't recorded that. So, you know, they can just sit. And it is I found it to be a valuable part of my process, because in order to tell my story to other people, I had to define it myself. In order to get it to come out the fingers, you know, I had to think about it and put it together, and that helped me. It helped me think about where I was going, because I had been writing about where I had come from to the present. That gave me a better sense of, and maybe some tools and motivation to, you know, to keep going. So yeah, me blogging. I did it for a year or two, and then I got into some other forms of getting the word out. So what else should we talk about before we wrap this up, Sarah? Anything else you've got?
Well, I think it's important to throw out there that, you know, everyone has something to offer.
Yes.
Everyone's story is valuable, and you know, again, whether you do it just for yourself or whether you decide to put it out there so that other people can see it, you know, and find part of their own experience, or you know, just become more aware of brain injury and stroke in general. Those are all wins, but I think, you know, sometimes it's hard for people to acknowledge that they have something valuable to share, and everyone's story is valuable and powerful. So
And that's what I told my friend when I encouraged her to post. You know, I said, well, you know, because she was like, well, I'm just a stroke survivor in the middle of recovery. And I said, yeah, but you're ahead of other people, and therefore you can provide hope. And like I said, it worked both ways. It had a real benefit to her. And guess what? She doesn't post a lot, but she now posts. Well, she just posted the other day when she finished a very difficult jigsaw puzzle. And I made sure I went and commented, like, I'm really proud of you, because 99 out of 100 people had given up on that jigsaw puzzle because it was very difficult. It was a round one, so the pieces aren't square. They're all kinds of weird shaped, and it had a lot of bold color patterns, but they're all mixed up. So anyway, so record everything that you do in video and pictures, and write things down like right away. I sometimes would come in from an experience and just literally sit down. I do it when I'm testing products. I come back from my walk like yesterday and the day before. I'm testing a product. I come back in while I'm cooling down. I sit down at the computer and I write down things. I remember things that will be gone later that afternoon, like times that things occurred, the names of songs, all that kind of thing. So that's true with your feelings too. Later on in your recovery, you remember part of them. You remember kind of like how you felt, but you don't remember the details of those feelings and the things that made you feel that way. So I would encourage everybody to just journal or keep track of your story privately, and if you ever want to share it, you can. And if you don't, you still got it. It'll help you in your journey. I would also, like you, I would say, I would encourage people to post in the groups, give other people hope, write up their whole story, because that isolation and the worrying about the future are I think the two biggest things for stroke and TBI survivors, and I think storytelling helps a lot with making those things better for readers. So,
Absolutely.
all right, well, so as a part of this whole initiative that we made this for, Sarah and I would both encourage you to tell your story and submit it here, there, anywhere. Like Sarah said, blog posts, Instagram, Facebook group, keep it to yourself, whatever.
Good.
All right. Well, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, I didn't have you. It was a joint conversation. I just hit the record button. So everybody out there, get busy on telling your stories. You can do a lot of good.
Absolutely.